MLS has been trying to position itself as one of the top leagues in the world since it was founded back in 1994. And now, over 30 years later, the league looks completely different. From the level of talent on the field to the growth of the youth academies, training facilities, fan culture, and even international recognition, there has been real progress. But with all that change, I wanted to get the perspective of someone who's lived it from the start. So I brought on Tab Ramos. He's been a player, a coach, and a longtime voice within American soccer. Few people have seen the full evolution of MLS like he has, and I wanted to hear how he thinks the league has changed, where it's still falling short, and what it needs to do to truly take the next step. Tab, welcome to the show, my friend. I have an interesting topic today, talking about MLS, talking about a little bit of USL. You have coached, played in MLS. You've seen it since its inception in 1996. Well, I guess the league was officially announced in 1994. But I first want to get into MLS. You played for the Metro Stars in 1996, if I'm not mistaken, right? And how many years was it you played for the Metro Stars?
7 until 2002. Yep.
Okay, 7 years. And then you coached the Houston Dynamo. I want to say, was it for 2 seasons or 3 seasons?
2 seasons.
Okay.
Both COVID seasons, 2020 and 2021.
The one question I wanted to ask you too is, what was the biggest difference you noticed in Major League Soccer from when you played in 96 for 7 years to 2002 to when you were coaching the Houston Dynamo for the 3 seasons or 2 seasons you were there? What was the biggest difference you noticed in the league? Hey, if you're enjoying the video, make sure you give it a like down below and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We're trying to hit 10,000 subscribers by the end of the year. So make sure you subscribe and hit that little bell notification so you never miss any of my videos. Now, back to the video.
Well, the biggest difference is easy. It's the facilities, right? It's the stadiums. It's the facilities where the teams train. And I think after that, I would say the travel. The travel is a lot better. Most of the time, you're flying on your own planes. Whereas before we flew commercial, if I could tell you a story when we had Carlos Queiroz, who's a great world name. He was Real Madrid coach, and he had coached in Portugal, national team, all those things. And he came to coach the Metro Stars. And in one time we were flying out of Newark on a commercial flight, and he gets up. I think he's in first class. The rest of the players were in the back, and I think it's one of the administrators. He called one of the administrators over and said to go tell the pilot that we're ready to go. And he didn't realize that, hey, this is just a commercial flight. You have to wait for whenever they're ready to go. It's not you. So big difference. Now, when I coached in Houston, we went to like a secondary private airport and flew on our own plane, and came back the night right after the game. So all those things make a huge difference for the players.
How big of a difference would you say the quality of the league has changed since when you played and coached? Because a lot of people think that back when you played, it was actually very, very good quality. Like a player like Carlos Valderrama, some people could say is one of the best players in the world at that time. It's one of the best players in Colombian history, played in the league like that. And then obviously there's a lot of talent now, a lot of younger talent in the league. And even when you were coaching as well, that's when I think the trend started to change, where you see these young South American players come to MLS, try to make a name for themselves and use MLS as a leaping pad to get to Europe. How different would you say the quality is in MLS versus when you played and versus when you coached, and even now?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head there, because it really is about the younger players. So the older players we've always had, right? So now we have a bunch of stars. Obviously, you'd never had a Messi before, but they had him in the NASL back when Pele was here. Is the only thing you can relate to that. But in general, there's a lot of big names now in MLS, but they're really no bigger than the names that we had back then. And I think you're referring to that. So, Lothar Matthäus was the World Player of the Year. I played with Roberto Donadoni, one of the greatest players to play the game from Italy. And it wasn't just Carlos Valderrama. It was Marco Echeverri. It was there was a bunch of great players back then. But yeah, the difference is in the younger players. Now, a lot of younger players I see in MLS as an opportunity, as a sort of a stepping stone between South America and Europe. They're willing to take that step to come here when right before they hit their prime. And I think that's something that we obviously never had access to before. It was just basically the much older players who, to be fair, were on their way out that came here, and the rest, I would say mostly journeymen who had been in the game for a while, college players, people who did well in college, and that's pretty much it. So I think the strength of the league is not comparable. Now you have legitimate rosters of 25 to 30 players who can come on the field and be and they have the skills to really produce in a professional game, and we didn't have that back then.
Yeah, and I want to get into what MLS can do better, maybe a little bit later in this episode, what you think needs to change. But as far as what the league is now, are you surprised by the quality of the league now? Is this something you thought would happen when you first started playing in '96? Or do you think that the league should be further than what it is at this point?
No, well, I mean, I think it's hard for me to have an opinion on either one. I mean, am I surprised at the level of the league? No, not really. The level is okay. It's not great, but it's not bad. It's some of the games are fun to watch, some are not. Just like most leagues, right? In terms of, do I think it should be further ahead? No, I mean, I really couldn't have imagined 30 years ago that we'd be here. But at the same time, I think there's a much deeper problem. And I think the deeper problem being that in terms of culture for the game, we haven't advanced that much. And that's a big disappointment for me. And that's not necessarily on the shoulders of MLS by itself, obviously, because I think we all, carry the burden of selling the game as much as we can and to bring in more fans. But unfortunately, that hasn't happened. Unfortunately, I can still go to a bar down the street and a soccer game is not on. And they're watching whether it's golf or whether it's women's basketball that gets 30 times the audience of an MLS game. So I think that's the part where we've missed. Do I have a solution for that? I don't, but I think after 30 years of the league, and in particular after the last 20 years having been a lot about developing stadiums and money and investing into it, I think we haven't figured out a way to attract fans to the game, and that's. And I mean by that, I don't mean to go to the actual stadium. I think outside the stadium. So let me give you an example. So let's say you're the owner of San Diego, right? And you came into the league and you pay X amount to come into the league, and you come to your stadium and the stadium is full. Well, it's likely that the people that are in your stadium, they're the only fans you have in the world. In the world, that's what you have. So whether you play in you're playing in Seattle, you go away and play in Dallas. It doesn't matter where you play. In general, people don't want to watch. It's only the fans that you have that go to your stadium. That's what you have. And I think, 30 years down the road, I think somehow we should have done better. I think the fact that I can travel from Newark to LA and in the airport, as I'm walking by, I'm likely peeking at an EPL game on the side. I think that should be an MLS game. And even if people aren't, crazy about it yet, I think you get it in front of people enough. That's how you develop fans, because, I would hate to see this opportunity of Messi being here, of it turning out to be like when Pele was here. You go to the great events, wherever Pele is, it's sold out, but then it doesn't really transpire into the culture of our people. And so I think that's maybe where the issue is. And, of course, it has nothing to do with the league itself, because the league is I think is a very competitive league, and it's a good league.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I'll get to in a second, like what you would change about the league. But when you brought up Messi is a very important point. You have the biggest star maybe in the history of football in your own country. He's still really good. He's probably going to play for Argentina in the 2026 World Cup, which is also going to be hosted in the United States. It felt like when Messi signed in 2023, Tab, the stars were aligning finally for Major League Soccer. Like everything perfectly from a marketing standpoint was finally happening for him. And I agree with you. I think if Messi's MLS tenure ended now, it would be a miss. I just don't think the experiment has done enough to help the game grow in this country or the excitement for the league. And I agreed also with what you said. I think it's probably because MLS is behind a paywall on Apple TV, and most people aren't going to go out of their way to find that and watch the games. It's not on linear television. It's not at bars. You can't just be at home scrolling through your normal cable package or YouTube, whatever you have. You know, a lot of people still watch live sports on that, whether some people want to admit that or not, but it's not easy or convenient to find an MLS game. So you're already taking a very niche league and making it even harder to find for people. But I will say this, because some people say, well, soccer just will never be big in this country. I don't buy that at all. The Premier League is very popular, like you said, in this country. There's people, all kinds of different people all over the country with Liverpool scarves, Man City jerseys, Manchester United, Chelsea, whatever it may be. Liga MX is very popular in the United States. Now, obviously, we have a huge Mexican-American population, and their families probably passed it down from generation to generation, the fandom. But that just shows that there is an appetite for soccer in this country. And for MLS to probably be the third or fourth most popular league in its own country, I just think is inexcusable. And they didn't do enough, and they haven't done enough with Lionel Messi to try to capture these people to make them lifelong fans in MLS.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I'm not interrupting in any way because I totally agree with what you're saying. I'll give you an example. So last weekend, River Plate was playing Boca Juniors in Argentina, right? So I grew up, the first few years of my life, I grew up in Uruguay. So I'm a Nacional fan in Uruguay, which normally a Nacional fan is a River Plate fan in Argentina. A Peñarol fan in Uruguay is normally a Boca Juniors fan in Argentina. So River Plate was playing. So I was like, wow, River Boca, 3:00. I got to watch it. I got to sit and watch it. Now, mind you, the center back for River Plate is Pizzella, who was at Betis and didn't do well the last year. He had a couple of good years, but now they sent him back. The center forward for River Plate is Juicy, who was at Austin and basically left out the back door, kind of. No disrespect because he's a good player, but he's a number 9 for River Plate. It didn't matter to me. I was watching River Plate against Boca Junior. I was watching the jerseys, right? So my point is that we need to get to a point where people are watching the jerseys. Like that's what they care about. It's not because, hey, we signed this, look, this shiny object that we're bringing in, and this is so nice. So you got to watch because we have this thing that we brought. No, I want to watch like the Red Bulls because I love the Red Bulls. Like that's what we need to feel. And I think that was a good example. And it just happened last week for me because I thought, wow, I'm watching River Plate and Drusy scored the second goal in the game. And I was like, and that made me think, I was like, he was just in Austin last year. And I actually never watched him. I didn't watch a single game of Austin last year, so that's the thing, Will, where I think we seem to be on the same page or aligned a little bit in terms of like that culture part. How are we not getting closer on the culture part? Forget the soccer, how well the teams play. I mean, fans want to win everywhere. So in the game, it's not about playing out of the back or not playing out of the back or your system or 4-3-3 or high press or whatever. Fans want to win. And that's enough, by the way. But how do we develop that culture of people wanting to watch? And I do agree, there is a culture for soccer in this country, but EPL stole a lot of it, and Mexico already had most of it. So that's kind of where we are. Now, with the World Cup coming in next year, there's I think, to me, one last opportunity in the last few decades. I think maybe if after the World Cup is over last year, MLS decides, hey, you know what? The owners get together. They decide they've paid hundreds of millions of dollars for these teams now. If they decide, hey, let's sign the top 10 players from the World Cup next year, maybe we have something new going, and maybe that's the change.
No, I agree. And I've always said in MLS, when it comes to MLS, everywhere else in the world, like what you're saying, the club makes the player. In Major League Soccer, the player makes the club. That's just how it is. That's how it always has been, I would say maybe the one exception might be the LA Galaxy, because I feel like maybe they're the brand that they sign all the big stars. Maybe they're like the one, but even then, they're still not big enough to where I feel like any person in that area or who's been a fan of soccer is going to support their team no matter what, kind of like what you're saying culturally.
Well, they were in the final last year, right? And if you look at the finals numbers and how many people watch nationwide, it just really wasn't there. Like people were not watching.
And you had LA versus New York. and it
Right.
was like no one even cared. Now you coached in USL, and USL recently announced that they're going to implement a pro rail system, and I think that they're doing this to try to compete with Major League Soccer because I think that USL sees blood in the water. They see Major League Soccer has been around for 30 years, and they really haven't. I mean, they definitely have been the most successful first division soccer league in the United States history, obviously, but they still haven't gotten to a level where they are completely untouchable, where they are completely 100% safe or where they want to be. And they're thinking maybe that they can capitalize on the appetite for soccer in this country by implementing pro rail. I want to get your thoughts on, first of all, what's your thoughts on USL's ambitions and the announcement that they're going to try to adopt a pro rail system?
So a couple things. The first one is that I think USL does see a little bit of blood in the water, because they started to realize that at the end of the day, MLS is still just a community based model. So only the people from the community go and watch their teams. And now USL can do the same a lot cheaper. And the local fans still go to the game and they don't care that they're not in MLS. They just go and watch their team. Right. So that's the one part. The other part is the pro rail. So that I would say that's the positive of USL. You can watch USL on ESPN Plus. It's a lot more. It's easy to reach. I do find myself watching some games on a Saturday, and I'm like, oh, what's on? And I'll go ESPN Plus and I'll watch. So they're finding a nice spot in the soccer. Let's call it pyramid because everybody calls it a pyramid. Okay, so let's say they found the spot in there, right? I think the pro rail thing, it's fine. I mean, I honestly, maybe just me, and I'd hate to disagree with Eric, because Eric is such a good friend, but I don't care that much about pro rail. I'll be honest. I don't care that much. I think the fans will go to the game anyway. I don't think they'll understand so much about pro rail. It could be a good thing, but it's also, let's face it. Let's say let's say the reality here. This is not an open pro rail system. It's not like you and I can start our team in our hometown and move all the way up to the USL one. No, you still have to buy in. You're still a franchise. It's still basically like MLS, whether you can have divisions or not. I mean, MLS could do that tomorrow. MLS could have a first and second within their league tomorrow. It's still a close league. So is pro rail great? I don't know. I don't know that it'll make a difference. But what I like about it is that it's a much cheaper league, and it's a community base, and I think they found a nice spot and people are watching it. They're watching it almost as much as they're watching MLS. And I think that's a good thing because, like you said before, there is an appetite for soccer in this country, and hopefully we have hundreds of teams in little communities.
No, I agree with that. And a mutual friend of ours, a tactical manager, has said that one of the things he likes about the pro rail possibly in the United States is just the fact that it gives you a community tie-in. There's something to root for. Like if your team is in the third or fourth division of the league, having the chance to even get to the first division, following that story. I'm sure you've obviously heard of Wrexham. They've done a really good job of selling that story, and they have been promoted. I think it's 3 years in a row now. Now they're in the championship. I think this is where it starts to halt. I don't know if they're going to make it to the Premier League in 1 year, but it is. I see the appeal and how cool it is to watch a team go from that low level to try to make it to the first division. I also think that USL. I don't know if they did this to get MLS to maybe purchase or acquire the league like a last ditch effort. I don't know what their ambitions are. I don't know any of the ownership groups in USL, what the financial capital they have, because kind of like what you said, you still have to buy in. Who are the owners? But I will say this about Pro Rail, Tab. So recently, like you said, LA Galaxy won MLS Cup in 2024. The following season, 2025, now they're winless through 14 matches, but they lost in their 12th match 7-0 to your former club, New York, Metro Stars, but now Red Bulls.
Right.
Lost 7-0. Then they had a 2-0 lead and then ended up losing 3-2 to the Philadelphia Union. I can't think of any other soccer league, and this is nothing personal against Greg Vanney, but I cannot think of another soccer league around the world where a team could be winless through 13 matches and their coach gets a contract extension That just seems unheard of. And I think that maybe if MLS, and look, I'm not like a pro rail advocate. I'm not like willing to die on the hill for that. But I would say this: the Galaxy have 4 points this year in 14 matches. There is no penalty. There is nothing. There is no punishment for that team being abysmal this year. They're not going to be relegated. Nothing's going to happen to them. And it doesn't seem like there's any consequences for how bad their season's been, especially their coach. He's getting a contract extension. I think that that is bad for the soccer culture because it's not really, I know it sounds like a very strong word, but punishing how bad you are.
Yeah, yeah. There's no question that if the LA Galaxy had now their job was to get out of the bottom four in the league, and they found themselves, however, probably about 8 points from that, roughly. That's a lot of points. That's a lot. At that point, someone would have pulled the lever overseas somewhere and said, "This is not working." And the other thing being that, and this is, I don't know for a fact, but apparently last year the LA Galaxy like way overspent over what they could. So this year they had to get rid of some players in order to comply with the league, right? Which goes to tell you, then I guess the coach doesn't really matter. What matters is whether if you're complying with the league, and you have less than the other teams, you're going to be at the bottom. And if one year they allow you to not break the rules, but be at the limit of the rules, then you have a chance to win. Which is, I think that's a bad sign, because obviously, if Greg Vanney is a great coach, he's a great coach every year. And some years you're not going to do great. So like Guardiola, obviously, there's no argument that he's great or maybe the best coach in the world. And this year he didn't have a good year, but he didn't end up last in the EPL. He's still at the top. So, yeah, there's a lot of funny things about our league that are like that, but and I can see why people wouldn't like that part of it. I don't focus so much on that. Like I said, I think my focus more is on our culture, and since I'm old enough to have seen, like for example, our league grow from when I signed with the league, we didn't even have names. So I signed to the New York team. I didn't even know what it was going to be called, right? To now, like we are like we've done so much, but the culture has barely moved.
Yeah. Well, I would say we'll transition to what you would change about the league, or maybe what your biggest issue is with the league outside of culture. But I'll say this about kind of what we just talked about with Greg Vanney. I think one of the biggest issues with Major League Soccer is its coaching. I don't think we have enough quality coaches to help develop young players, or that actually just know what the hell they're doing. Now, I know you coached the Houston Dynamo, and I think that you didn't actually get a fair chance just because it was a weird situation, which you can go into if you want to or not. But that's just my opinion. I don't think you really had a fair chance to really thrive in the organization. It was just really weird circumstances. I believe if you were at a club that given you more resources, you would have thrived, because I mean, that's obviously, it's going to be hard to win if you got one hand tied behind your back. I mean, it's just how it is. But coaching, I believe, is an issue, because in Major League Soccer there are a lot of coaches, and this is not personal, it's just my opinion, that they get opportunity after opportunity when maybe they are not willing to, they're not deserving to have another opportunity. Maybe give another guy a chance to get his first job. And it's not just domestic coaches, it's also international coaches. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with Rob Valentino, who was coaching Atlanta United. He was able to beat number one team Inter Miami, and that was a huge upset. And they decided to move off of him, and they hired Ronnie Dyla, who's not a good coach in my opinion. He's got 2 wins through 14 matches. They just spent $50 million in the last 12 months. But you had a guy who had a less talented roster and was able to get you over the hump of something many people didn't think would happen. And he's at home not coaching right now. No team gave him a call after what he did. I just think there's a lot of favoritism maybe in MLS. It's kind of clicky, but that's just kind of how it's always been, I would say. And that the coaching is not where it needs to be, because getting these young players their opportunities, developing them, is crucial to getting this league to another level.
Okay, so yeah, that's a long-winded, I guess, question, but I'll start with Houston. So I'll say this: I actually loved my time in Houston. Unfortunately, it was a bad time because we got in there. I coached my first game against LA Galaxy at home. That was Chicharito. That was Pavon. It was a great team. We tied 1-1 in just about a full stadium. And midweek that week, the COVID thing started. So we played one more game in Kansas City, and then the league was shut down for the next 4 months. So then my next game coach was in the bubble. Definitely not your average season. We were doing individual training on the field for 4 months. I mean, it was crazy. Having said that, I failed in Houston because at the end of the day, coaching is about winning games. And this goes back to what you're saying about Vanny. I don't think it matters what you've done before. Like, coaching is about winning, and it's about winning now, right? I didn't do a good job because I didn't win. So of course I can say, well, I got into Houston, and as soon as I got in, they told me the team's going to be sold. And by the way, we're going to sell Elise, we're going to get rid of Kyoto, and we're going to sell Manotas. And I'm like, well, but that's your whole front line. And by the way, you were like almost in last place with these guys on the team. Well, we got to get rid of them because we're going to sell the team. Okay, so now I'm thinking, okay, I have, let's just say, not the best team, right? And on top of it, the 3 guys up front who are dangerous are going to be gone. So now what do I say? So now when you are talking to the owner, you would never say to an owner, there's no way I can win games. You always have to say, I'll figure it out. I'll find a way, and I'm that guy anyway. We did it with the youth national teams. We won games we weren't supposed to win. You never think you can't win. Like, that's what you're there for. And so, but we didn't. So that's the bottom line. In Houston, it didn't work. But I also, to be fair, I didn't, my deck of cards was, it was not perfect. And by the way, I have to say, the players worked as hard as they could work from day one until the day I left. There's not a single thing I can say about the players. Now, I benched Darwin Quintero a bunch of times. People didn't like that, but it was almost a little bit of what you start to see with Luis Enrique now at PSG, right? Listen, man, if you can be the best player, that's great. But if you're going to stand around, we don't have a team for you to stand around. Like, you got defensively, you got to do something. You got to help us. Otherwise, we're not like so far ahead of everybody else that we can afford to play with one less when we don't have the ball. So, and some people may not agree with that. I just was not that coach. So it didn't really work for me. It worked, so yeah, at the end of the day, it was a failure because as a coach, you have to win. But it was also a little bit not fair. I'd say that. I lasted both years until the end of my contract because I had a 2-year contract. So I lasted both years, but unfortunately, I didn't do the job that I was paid to do, which was to get our team into the playoffs, and I didn't do that.
So what would you say if you were the commissioner for just a day? What would you change about Major League Soccer?
Well, I don't know enough. Major League Soccer is such a huge business, and it's a single entity project, let's call it. And I think Don Garber has grown the league. I mean, he even tweeted last week, right? Growing MLS one team at a time. That's great, but I would try to figure out how I can get into the culture of the people and not so much worry about selling the next club, but maybe, and I'm not saying they're not doing that. Maybe they're doing everything they can and they just haven't found a way. But I would think my top priority would be, listen, before Messi's gone, how do we get into the homes? Let's make this league available to everyone so everyone can see it. And I know it's easy for where I sit because it doesn't affect me, but if you have 250 million coming in from Apple every year, maybe it makes you want to say, okay, I want to be hiding in Apple, but I just don't think it's good for the league. I don't think it's good for our fans. And I think we need to figure out a way that everybody can see soccer every Saturday, regardless. That I would try to figure that out, but I don't have an answer right now for that. I don't think I could be I don't think I'm smart enough to be the commissioner anyway. It's not my kind of thing.
Well, do you think that visibility, I mean, obviously visibility is a huge deal, but do you think are you in the camp of thinking spending should expand as well? I mean, are you cool with just the 3 DPs, which has been how it's been for like 14 years now, 5 million salary cap? Like, do you think that spending should increase, or do you think that it goes beyond that? Do you think that would get people more interested? Obviously we just talked about Messi and how you can't just have one guy, but just building a stronger squad from top to bottom maybe could get, because there are people who just watch a game and they don't have interest because they don't think the quality is as good as what they're seeing in Europe. There are fans like that, sadly. I mean, it just is how it is. Do you think spending would maybe be able to capture some of these people?
I don't think spending will solve that in the current environment. I think, and I don't think they should spend any more than they are now in the current environment, because you're spending all of this money on players, and at the end of the day, you only have 200,000 people watching the games on TV. I don't think you're getting your money's worth regardless. So I think until they figure out a way through the networks, and maybe this is something that can be worked out after the World Cup next year with the networks, to be on, whether it's NBC, ABC, CBS, somewhere where everybody can watch this for free. I think at that point you spend and you bring in the big stars, and now everybody sees them every week. So now it's different. I don't think we're ready at this point to spend more money. I think because otherwise, I think you keep spending and the teams keep losing money, and I just think you're going deeper in a hole. I think it's solving the problem of being seen and then doing the spend. And maybe somebody, listen, I don't want to. I'm just, at the end of the day, I'm just a coach, and I was a former player, so I'm not going to solve. But I'm sure that maybe having networks partner with the league in terms of being able to bring big stars and showing them on every Saturday, maybe that's a way to go. But I'm so far removed from having an actual intelligent answer that I can only say this as a fan.
Well, I appreciate you for coming on today, Tab. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. Make sure you go follow him. I think it's at Tab Ramos on X, if I'm not mistaken. Is there a number in there?
It's Ramos Tab.
Ramos Tab. Make sure you go follow on X at Ramos Tab. Until next time, guys, I will see you all soon.